So we are live now. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Julia Gorton. I'm the Director of State Government Affairs for the Washington Hospitality Association. And today we are joined by individuals from the Employment Security Department, Raphael Colon and Bill Colleton, experts in the SharedWork program. We had a number of questions. This is probably the most asked question from our membership about the appropriate way to bring employees back to work after they've been furloughed or laid off for a period of time. We're going to go through the SharedWork program, which we think is a great option for employers. And this option should also address the issue of employees who have been able to receive some of the very generous federal benefits from the unemployment insurance system. This will ensure that they're able to continue to maintain that federal $600 weekly benefit while also returning to work. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Raphael.
Good morning, Julia. Thank you very much for having us. It's a pleasure to be able to present this program. This is a nationally recognized program that has been in Washington State for about 35 years. It is fantastic. We've done a repurposing of it in terms of marketing and, excuse me, and the brand that we've been using to convey its information to employers is SharedWork is a shared win, as you can see on your screen there. Businesses win, employees win, and communities win. It's a trifecta of everybody coming together to utilize it in a very powerful way. One, to restore businesses, give employees some level of assistance, and ensure that our communities are strong as we move forward. Rather than Raphael taking the time to explain the program, we have a nationally recognized 2.5 minute video I'd like to share with you. So why don't we do that so that I can explain the program, and then we'll make a quick transition, go into some questions and answers that Bill will provide, and then we want to spend the rest of the time talking with you and answering your questions. So if you would, Julia, start the video.
Here we go.
It happens to every business. A bump in the road. Maybe demand for your product or services goes down.
Julia, can you restart it from the beginning? There we go. Need to unmute the volume, can't hear it.
Demand for your product or services goes down. The market goes in the tank. I don't know. The city decides to tear up your street and divert traffic away from your business for months. All you know is that your business is in a fix, and you've got hard decisions to make. You don't want to lay off staff. They're like family. But what else can you do? The answer? The Washington Employment Security Department's SharedWork program. The SharedWork program saves employers money and employees jobs. Here's how it works. Instead of cutting jobs, you cut hours. Then employees can collect partial unemployment benefits for the hours they've lost. Say an employee's hours are cut temporarily by 50%. In addition to a partial paycheck, the worker will get 50% of his or her regular weekly unemployment benefit. In other words, employers save payroll and hang on to their skilled workforce, while employees keep their jobs and collect unemployment for the hours lost. And the program is so flexible. From week to week, you can change your level of participation, from the number of employees to the number of hours, up to 50%. It's all up to you. Don't think of the SharedWork program as unemployment insurance. Rather, it's employment insurance, a safety net. This is a program that keeps workers employed. This is a program that shows employees that you care. The SharedWork program protects your business during the lean times. That is, until you're ready to contact WorkSource, Washington's employment services system, to start hiring. How successful has the SharedWork program been? More than 96% of business owners who have used it would sign up for the program again, and virtually all would recommend it to other employers. And a large majority even said the program helped them survive the recession. In every business, there are peaks and valleys. When you hit one of those valleys, we'll be here for you. Washington State's Shared Work program. It saves money, it saves jobs. Plain and simple, it works. Here's how to reach us when you're ready to get started.
Thank you, Julia. Now, as you can see, there's some information there that may be outdated because it speaks more about a recession, although we're in an unfortunate time right now of a valley. But that's one of the things that the emergency rules that have passed within Washington State have enabled this program to be a great opportunity for employers in their return to work efforts with employees, bringing them back. So my colleague, Bill Culleton, who's been with the program for 11 years, a great steward of this program with profound knowledge, is putting on weekly webinars, and he'll tell you more about that. But Bill loves hiking. He loves spending time with his grandchildren. He's a great friend and colleague, and I'd like to introduce him and have him join us now so that he can walk us through some of the program, and then we want to specifically get to your individual questions that you have to make this a great win for you. So with that, Bill, thanks for joining us.
And
Thanks, Raphael. Go ahead, Julia.
Real quickly,
Julia?
how we can ask questions. I apologize, forgot to go over that in the beginning. Up on your toolbox, you'll see a section for Q&A. If you just open that Q&A, you should be able to ask questions that way. If you're having trouble navigating that, if you go to the More section, there's a couple dots. You can open up the chat and also utilize that. And we'll be monitoring that throughout this presentation. So go ahead, Bill.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you, Julia. So we're on the COVID-19 and shared work slide. Thank you all for coming and your interest in this program. I think you'll find it has a lot of positive applications, and we're hoping it can work for some of you to help you retain your employees through this time. The program is one that is initiated by employers. So employers apply, and employees will then participate and collect part of their unemployment benefits. So they're getting paid for the hours they do work, the reduced hours, and then they receive a partial benefit from their unemployment program. It does not make the employee whole. It's important that we know that. And when their employees are in the shared work range, which is shown on the chart here, and I think if we have a chance to go to our webpage later, we can show this chart. Is the chart up there now?
Yes, let me
Okay.
go ahead and quickly share that here. Oh, I'm gonna need my control panel to move though, so I can, there we go.
Okay, so you can see there's several tables on this chart, and the tables represent the employee's usual weekly work hours, and we're going to talk about that here in a few minutes. But each table is designated for the employee's specific hours. So for example, if you have a 40-hour employee, and I appreciate your industry has a lot of varied hours for employees, but this chart works like this. If it's a 40-hour employee, the shared work range for that employee is 20 to 36 hours. Whenever they're in that range, they're paid by the shared work system. Outside the range, we'll look at that in a few minutes. So it's a partial benefit. They get 50% if they work 20 hours, you can see. So they would get a paycheck from the company for 20 hours, and they'd get 50% of their weekly benefit amount, which we'll talk about. The program is for full-time and permanently hired part-time employees. And if salaried folks can be aware and come up with an hourly rate, they can participate also. Next slide. So traditionally, claimants, participants in the shared work program do not have to look for work. At this time, work search is an option, but eventually that will come back. So that's a benefit of the program. They do not have to look for work, where most unemployment claimants do have to look for work while they're getting benefits. They do have to work all the hours that the employer has for them. That's important. Employers must continue to pay for the employee's health benefits. Basically, the way I say this is any benefits that exist prior to shared work must be maintained through shared work. Shared work plans, they last a year and employers may reapply. And there may be a possibility for benefit extensions for the shared work employees, just like regular unemployment folks. And this plug for a free webinar, I encourage you, if you get to our webpage, there's a link on the left side. It says webinar, and you're able to sign up. There's 2 a day. You're welcome to join me for those where you get specific questions answered. Next slide.
Thanks, Bill. And before we move on, because employers do have to apply for the shared work program, are there any things that would immediately disqualify an employer from being eligible, or what sort of things are you looking for in that?
Sure, and that's a good question. And because of the virus right now, we've actually relaxed most of our requirements. So the 2 things that we still do look at are that the employer submits at least 2 employees on the application, and I think we'll get a chance to look at that in a minute. But so 2 employees at least are submitted on the application. And then the only other criteria that we're checking right now is refers to seasonality. And seasonality is kind of a misunderstood term from our standpoint. Many businesses that feel they're seasonal do not end up being seasonal by our analysis. So in the 11 years I've been here, when I talked with businesses who feel they're seasonal, only about 10% of them end up being seasonal by our definition. So it's pretty straightforward. The other eligibility requirements are being waived right now. So it's about that simple.
Great.
So this next slide, what are hours based on? Is that where we are? Right. Okay. This was a question that was asked prior to our session today, and so we've answered that. It's the hours on the application. There's a column that says usual weekly work hours, and those hours are intended to be the hours prior to any reduction. So they're normal hours, when they're working normal, when things are humming along, and maybe you're thinking about even hiring somebody, so 6 months ago or something. Those are the usual hours of work that we're looking for. The next question, employers are required to bring employees back at usual work hours. That can't be less than 10% or more than 50%. And here again is another area the program is flexing. So if you've read about shared work, you see we talk a lot about a 10 to 50% reduction in their usual weekly work hours. But again, this is an area that we're flexing. And so right now, we're conscious of the fact that a lot of employees have drastically reduced and even 0 hours. And at this point, that's not a problem. They should go ahead and complete the application, and those employees will be paid as regular unemployment until they're in the shared work range. So that shared work range is the 50 to 90% of their usual weekly work hours. Next slide. So what are hours based on? So if an employee is not receiving any hours in a previous week, then what would any level of employment qualify to participate in the shared work program? Well, the basis for eligibility is based on the prior year's work. So it's not determined by the recent past. It's more looking at the last year. So that's not going to be a problem. Their eligibility is determined just as any unemployment claim would be determined. So in this case, how does ESD define usual work hours? And the answer is that the usual hours of work prior to having to reduce their hours, or in a lot of cases now before having 0 hours. So once again, what we want on that application for usual hours work is when things are normal, what was that person working, okay? You might have cases where you have people that work varied hours each week. And in fact, in your industry, I believe you do. So in that case, what you would do to determine that single number to put in the column, and I hope we'll look at that application in a minute, is you'd run an average, and your look back could be a month, it could be 3 months or a year, whatever you feel is necessary to come up with a representative number, a single number that could be put on the application that represents their usual weekly work hours. We've got to start there, so that's important. 40-hour folks, it's straightforward, but when you have part-time or varied hours, we need an average. Next slide.
Bill, I think we've seen a lot of changes to eligibility. When we're considering employees who are eligible for shared work, do they have to meet that 680 hours threshold?
Yes, they do, Julia. Thank you for clarifying that. And one of the ways that I share with others is if the employee qualifies for regular unemployment, then they qualify for shared work.
Got it. And then we had a question pop up in the Q&A, and I'm not sure if we're going to touch on that in this presentation. So good question about what is the benefits of the shared work program versus just bringing an employee back and having them file independently on their own for unemployment.
Yeah, the benefits really, the normal benefits are that they don't have to look for work. And in these times, that's not an issue because that's being waived. What looking for work's optional. But the big difference is the chart we looked at earlier, because when the employees are in that shared work range on that chart, they will receive a benefit regardless of their earnings. Whereas if their hours are outside of the shared work range, they're going to be calculated as regular unemployment, and it depends a lot on their gross earnings. And oftentimes the gross earnings will be too much and they will not receive a benefit. So being in that shared work range, if recalling that chart we looked at, that 20 to 36 hours for a 40-hour employee, that's the value right there. Because if I'm working 20 hours and I'm not in shared work, the system is going to consider my gross earnings associated with those 20 hours, and I may or may not get a benefit. If I'm in shared work, I definitely will get a benefit. The other thing until July 25th of this year that's critical is if I'm eligible for a benefit, I'm going to get an additional $600. So that's, I'd say, an important difference. So just to clarify, if you're in the shared work range, you're going to get a benefit. If you're not in the shared work range, you may not. And so therefore being a participant in shared work is a value.
Now, Julia, historically,
Also,
oh, go ahead, Julia. Historically, the shared work program has been a layoff aversion program. So what it did is it enabled employers in an economic situation avoid layoffs. And so what it did is help them retain their skilled workforce by reducing their hours. Since we're dealing without a playbook now, and we're obviously adapting to emergency rules as they happen with our current environment, shared work is reframing itself to allow some flexibility and then look at a return to work effort, which could be phased in as the governor's phases are happening. Hours may be different, etc. But the benefit in the long run had always been as a layoff aversion program to retain your skilled workforce. And so now that's somewhat the same, but we're looking at more of a return to work effort emphasis right now as a benefit.
right, and I was going to emphasize that as well, Raphael. It maintains sort of a connection to the employee, where an employer is more likely to retain that employee even though they're only getting reduced hours or fewer hours than they would have. It reduces that incentive for the employee to leave and find work elsewhere.
Absolutely. You bring up a very good point, because we know that retention is very, very important, right? We also know the cost of rehiring someone, retraining someone, and all those situations that happen. So that's where shared work is a benefit, because you can reduce their hours, still keep that skilled individuals, keep that person you've invested in for years, training them. There's a great employer-employee relationship there. And so it seems to be a very agreeable situation, and the employee ends up agreeing to the reduction of hours, and it's a nice win-win-win. That's the campaign that we launched, and again, you said it very nicely.
Great. Let's move on. Okay.
So we're back to that employee is now eligible slide. Is that correct?
That's
Yes.
correct.
Okay. So as we've talked, this is a case where the employee has some hours, so they will be paid by the employer for those hours that they work, and they'll receive a partial benefit from the unemployment system or from shared work. And this, the statement there, it is different than partial. The program, unemployment has standby, it has partial employment, it has regular unemployment, and it has shared work. Shared work is the only one that has a distinction when it comes to how benefits are calculated. Okay, all the rest are the same. So if they're not in the shared work range, their benefits are calculated just like anyone else on unemployment. When they're in the shared work range, then their benefits are calculated more favorably. The $600, and again, as we mentioned, as long as they're entitled to at least $1 of benefits in a specific week, they will receive that additional $600, and that is through July 25th of this year, so just next month. And the extension, the EEUC extension, that is available to shared work participants. And let me just make a kind of a blanket statement. There are no penalties or I guess negatives to a shared work participant compared to a regular unemployment person, okay? So by participating in shared work, they're not losing out in any other program or option. And this PEUC is a federal option that basically it adds 13 weeks to their maximum benefits paid. So they are eligible for that. Next slide. So when an employer has laid off a lot of staff, and we realize that's what's going on in this industry, we kind of go through these series of if this, you know, if then. So if they're taken off payroll and they're now being brought back, are they being brought back for the same position that they left, or is this a new position? And that's an important piece, because again, we go back to the usual hours, usual weekly work hours, and we go down to example 1 here. So they'd laid them off but kept them on payroll, say on standby. This would not be a rehire. You would use the same date as far as the hire date on the application. In the second example, where they've actually been formally separated from the company, they've been taken off payroll, but you're now bringing them back, you would use the new hire date and you would put their usual hours worked. If it's the same time, you'd put the same hours. If you're bringing them back to a new position that has different hours, then it would be the new hours. And then if the employer wants to rehire some of its staff at diminished hours, that's same as number 2. Next slide.
We had another question can't come through. If you have brought employees back at a reduced hour and they have filed on their own for unemployment, assuming you can just transfer them onto the shared work program.
Yes.
If you just application. Okay.
Good question. And let me just tell you how that works. And that is kind of the secret sauce of this program. So anybody that has a claim and then is listed on an employer's application. So when that application is approved and that plan starts, effective the start date of that plan, any employee that had an unemployment claim, that claim will automatically become shared work at that time. Nobody has to do anything extra, the employee or the employer, it just happens. And similarly, when people file claims after the company's shared work plan has started, those claims are all designated as shared work.
Great. And then I think we have a clarification on, because we mentioned standby. So what's the difference between shared work and standby?
Right, good question. Standby is traditionally intended for people with 0 hours. Typically, the example I use is a refinery has a shutdown and they're shutting down for a week because they've got to change some equipment. Sometimes mills replace saws and big things and they just shut down. It's for 0 hours for a defined amount of time. It was a kind of a life ring in this current situation because people didn't know, and so a lot of people filed for standby. But once again, anyone that has a claim, which would include standby, those would automatically turn into shared work once the employer's plan is approved and that effective start date. The difference, basically, standby is for a prescribed amount of time. It's been extended to 12 weeks through this period, and shared work's a year. So, and people are able to report 0 hours. Once again, that's our flexing. We talk about 50% reduction, but we have employees now that are with a more, you know, a greater reduction than 50%, 60, 70, 80, 100%. And that's okay. They stay on shared work, and we're looking for this all to improve here in the future, and they'll get back to their hours, hopefully. So standby 0 hours and shared works for partial.
When we show the charts at the end and we navigate the website, Bill, I think it'd be great to show them an example of that.
Yeah, we'll do that. Other questions?
I think that's all in this issue area. I am seeing more questions come up, but if we're going to touch on that subject later, I'm holding them for that.
Yeah, we can go to the website. We can do some work there. I'm going to just talk you through it. Is that Julia that's going to be navigating?
I'm going to turn it over to her.
Yeah, Julia's going to turn it over to me.
Okay.
And I'm going to navigate the website. So as soon as she stops sharing, then I'll start sharing.
So let me know when you're at the Forms Media Library page.
Okay. I'm going to go there now.
Okay.
And find our website here. And I'm going to go to this one here. And are we sharing, Julia?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. So right. Bill, are you seeing where I'm at right here on the main page?
Yeah, if you go down to the second to the last link on the left.
Okay, I'll be there in a second. So just to let the listening and viewing audience know, this shared work page is at esdwa.gov. Sorry, that's my fax machine in my office. It'll go off again. /shared work, or you can simplify it by just going to SharedWorkWA.com. That's a quick way to find it as well. It'll be redirected here. So we have a bunch of quick links here. We've tried to streamline this page. Bill's going to take you straight to the Forms library, and then we'll come back and look at some other things for you. It's very simplified. Forms library is down here. He wants to bring up some charts. I'll let you talk to it about it, Bill, and I'll navigate for you.
Okay, thanks, Raphael. First of all, on the left, before we leave the left side there, the second link below homepage, it says webinar. And that's an important one. You can please take your, be free to join those. It's a chance that you've got right here, as Raphael is showing you, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, at 10:15 and at 2:45. There are sessions for specific questions. We can get into detail with you. So feel free to join in on one of those if you'd like. So now, Raphael, if we could, what I'd like to do is just take a quick stop at the very first link in the middle of the application, the employer application, the very first one at the top. And folks, this is the application. It's pretty straightforward. The only thing I want to caution you, be sure you download it before you fill it in and have it on your machine, and then save it. And that's good, Raphael. It's pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We'll go to the next link. So you download that, fill it in, save it on your machine. And the next link is the employee list. And I want to spend just a minute on there's a column that's usual weekly work hours we've talked about. I want to just show it to them.
It's a PDF. It's taking time to load. Yeah.
That's actually, yeah, we don't. It's not critical. If we don't want to show this, we can skip it.
Well, it's okay. It has to go through a bunch of hoops.
Yeah, it's basically, when it comes up, folks, you're going to see it's a list: name, first name, last name, social security, hire date, and then that column there where he is usual weekly work hours. That's the one we talked about, and that's the one. It just makes sure that it's just one number. You have employees that work varied hours, but we can't take 10 to 15 hours or 15 to 20. It has to, that was where I spoke earlier about averaging. If you have varied hours, you've got to come up with a single number for that column. And I think the rest of it's pretty straightforward.
So do you think we should have folks averaging the hours? What should they be using if they have varied?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, it's really the only way, Julia, I think, that a person can come up with an hour for an employee that has varied hours. They just have to, like I said, if it's a 1 month look back or 6 months or whatever the employer feels is going to give them the best representation of an average for that person, and that'll work. Okay.
Okay.
It's also here, Bill, on the, it's a great question. When you go to apply, the additional employee list pages is right here. So that's the question Julia and Bill were mentioning, usually week hours worked reduction. Right here, Bill?
Yeah, this is if you don't have very many employees, you can use this. This is a limited, the Excel is important. If you use the Excel list that we looked at to begin with, it's important to maintain that Excel format when you save it. But yeah, the same column, that's right.
Perfect.
Getting that average hours number correct is important because when employees hit the average hour they've been hired for, do their benefits stop?
Yeah, well, now that we've got the importance of that, now let's go, Raphael, to the first link in the next group there, the payment calculation chart. We've looked at this earlier, but I want to now answer your question, Julia. Okay, so the reason that usual weekly work hours is important is that's going to tie the employee to these tables here. And these tables are for visual only. This is not, nobody has to do any math with these. These tables are showing us visually what the computer is doing with the employee's information each week when they file. So they're going to report some number of hours, and the system has to know what their usual weekly work hours, because if you could go ahead up to 40, Raphael.
Absolutely.
And so if I'm and I just using the example of 40 hours, and my explanation will fit all of the tables, but what's important to catch right here is these tables are tied to the hours that were listed on that application we just looked at. So if my usual weekly work hours were listed as 40, this is the table the system will use to determine my benefits each week. So I file my benefit, my claim, my weekly claim. It says, here's Bill, he's a shared work guy. How many hours did he report? 30 hours. So at 30 hours, he's going to receive 25% of his weekly benefit amount plus $600 through July 25th of this year. Okay, so any number of hours between 20 and 36, I will receive that percentage of my weekly benefit amount. Now, the weekly benefit amount is determined by the agency for each employee, and it's based on their prior year's work. And if you searched in the search window on this web page, said calculate your benefits, that's where you'll find everything you need to know about the weekly benefit amount. So any of our search windows on any of our web pages, calculate your benefits, and that'll tell you the weekly benefit amount. So when you're in that range, that's great. Now, Raphael, if you would go down to the third in that same group, the third one, yeah, that one.
Just real quick before you get on.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
If someone's usual weekly hours is more than 40, so they regularly work 50 hours.
Right. Their maximum that we will enter into the system is 40 hours.
Okay.
Good question. We get that. Yeah. And in this industry, I'm sure you have that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the other, Raphael, if we could look at the other table, the third one down on the page. Yeah, that one. There you go. Thank you. So folks, looking at the other, and I'm going to stick with a 40-hour example. I appreciate you may have some 30s in those, but these all fit the same. The numbers are just different in the tables. So whenever a person's hours for a week are not in the range that's listed on the table we just looked at, if they're outside the range, so this week I'm going to report 15 hours. Okay, so the system goes, Bill's a shared work guy is reporting 15 hours. That's outside of his range. So we're going to have to use this earnings deduction chart. And this chart is the chart that's used for all unemployment. So standby, partial, regular unemployment, everybody's benefits are calculated using this, which, if you'll notice, is all about dollars. Okay, the shared work table we looked at, we didn't even talk about dollars. It didn't matter. The system just needed to know the hours. If I was in the range, I got paid, right? So see here, I could work 24 hours and make $1 million, and I'm still going to get 40% of my weekly benefit amount. Okay, so it's real important to understand that's the value of shared work. We talked about it earlier. As your employees start to get back into their range, it's going to be advantageous for them. So here, on the other hand, let's say I work those 15 hours, and my gross earnings now are all the system is going to use. It's going to say his hours weren't enough, so we got to defer to this method of calculating the benefits. So my $385 of gross earnings has a $285 deduction. And the far right column is showing it's called an earnings deduction, but I would prefer that it said deducted from my weekly benefit amount because of my earnings. So you find the earnings here, the $385 gross earnings. You have a $285 deduction from your weekly benefit amount. And if my weekly benefit amount was $300, it would leave me with $15. So I would be receiving a benefit from unemployment that week from shared work of $15 plus $600 because I'm eligible for at least $1. I'm eligible for 15. So I'll get that $600, which is available through July 25th of this year. So this is kind of where the boogeyman lives. This is difficult. It can be confusing. It's intimidating. It's a lot of numbers. But the key, I think, is knowing their employees' usual weekly work hours, and then choosing a chart. If you'd flip back, Raphael, the usual weekly work hours will determine one of these tables, and whichever table that is employees associated with, each week they report, the system looks here, and if they're in the range, they get a percentage of their benefit. If they're not, it goes to the other and uses their gross earnings. So,
Bill,
yeah.
Let's mathematically do this. I'm coming back. Julia brings me back at 20 hours. Just phase one of her plan as a business owner is to bring me back. And so she brings me back in the 20 hours. That's what I used to do prior to the reduction of this COVID-19 and now back. Walk me through the 20 hours.
Okay, so I'm a 20-hour employee that Julia submitted on the company application. So
Yes.
when the system gets my report, so each week I'm filing a claim, and in this particular example week, I filed a claim and I worked 12 hours.
Okay.
So I'm in the shared work range as a 20-hour employee. I will receive 40% of my weekly benefit amount. Okay.
Okay.
And the example I'm using is a $300 weekly benefit amount.
Okay.
Okay. So I'd receive that payment from unemployment, and of course I would have gotten a 12-hour check from the company, right?
Right.
And because I'm eligible for, when you're in the shared work range, you're always eligible for a benefit because you're going to get that percentage of your weekly benefit amount.
Okay,
So
perfect.
because I'm eligible, I will get the additional $600 through July 25th.
Okay.
And there was a question if the $600 was extended beyond July 25th, and the answer as of right now is no, it has not been extended.
That's correct.
Correct.
Again, as of right now, it has not been extended. Things are moving much quicker than we've ever seen before on the federal side. So
That's right. So again, these two tables can be found in the shared work library, forms library, under application and forms for navigating and understanding what's there. Anything else there, Bill?
I don't think, yeah, let's just, Raphael, if you'll scroll down towards almost to the bottom, it says plan forms. And there's the upload link. If you can show that, it's hard to see. It's a little bit small maybe, but down, yeah, right there. So folks, this is a really good way to submit the application. We looked at that initially on how to fill that out and save it in the participant list, the employee list on the Excel document. So you would upload 2 documents. It's a 2-step process, unfortunately, but this is a very secure way to transmit Social Security numbers to us securely, and it's a very efficient on our end for processing applications when we get them. So I'd encourage you to do this. The alternative, which is also a good way, is through e-services. And Raphael, if you would mind just going up to the top and hitting home on the left, go to the esd.wa.gov home, the big home up there. Yeah. And and scroll down to the middle of the page, a little below the middle. You'll see e-services on the left, a little more down, there, right there. So this is a good way for employers to apply for SharedWork also. They'll set up their e-services account and go in and apply for SharedWork. You can do that right through there. So that's a efficient, good way to apply as well as the other alternative that we just looked at.
So Bill, we do have a couple of technical questions on the e-services account and filing for SharedWork. Should those questions be direct? I know we had Cheryl's contact info up at the final slide. Should those more technical questions be directed towards Cheryl? Or?
Yeah, there's actually, there's an email address on the last slide, and we will get that. So that's a good place to send those questions. The other thing I can share is when an employer is approved, and they get quite a packet from us. So they've applied, we've gone through the approval process, they receive an email, and in there's a technical support package with links and so forth, which will include support for the e-services setup process.
Okay, great.
So a couple of things just to add. In the media library, or under our quick links again under SharedWork, Bill spoke about those ways to apply on e-services, and it says apply here 2 ways. Here's the opportunity to download the application and save it. Here's the additional list for employees, although we want you to use the one in the forms library, the Excel spreadsheet, and the opportunity to upload. And then here's the e-services information as well. So we've streamlined everything to make it easy for you. The FAQs are for when SharedWork was in its normal state. Now under the situation of COVID-19, we've added some additional FAQs that if you're in the ESDWA GOV site at home, down here in the lower right under COVID-19, we have questions about returning to work, frequently asked questions. And if you click there, you will find questions related to information for employers here. The site has been fairly streamlined too to provide you information about the Federal CARES Act. When does PUA apply? When does PEUC? What's that mean? And then here's the $600 information from March 29th to July 25th. So again, we strongly encourage, one of the things we've been strongly encouraging is employers to spend time navigating our resources, because the information is changing daily with emergency rules and policies being written, to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes on the site and gather information for yourself. You're gonna gather information. It's gonna help you make more informed decisions and be able to ask some very specific questions to your particular need so that we can answer that for your benefit and the employee's benefit. So 20 to 30 minutes, you'll get a strong return on investment if you do that.
Great. Now we've got a couple questions in the Q&A.
Sure.
Is this a good time to start going through them?
Okay. Absolutely. Keep going through questions. Yes, ma'am.
So, so important. Does this impact your experience rating? And the answer is yes, it does impact your experience rating. And I will also say that the SharedWork program is a program that's being reimbursed by the federal government. And correct me if I'm wrong, if you know something different.
You're right.
Yeah, it's
wrong. Okay.
Yeah, that part is they can apply for a relief of benefit charges is what we would advise at this point for SharedWork benefits. But you're correct as far as them affecting the experience rating. SharedWork benefits paid affect the experience rating just the same as regular unemployment does, and most people understand how that does. Basically, the benefits that are paid are considered when they come up with the experience rating.
Right. And then I do understand, or what I understood from a previous conversation is that it is possible for us to have the experience rating waived. We just need to have some legislation passed in order to do that. The federal government has said as long as your state allows it, and I don't think the current situation was ever contemplated. So we would just need additional legislation. So the opportunity there for those experience rating charges to be non-charged is an option still.
Very
Yeah,
good.
you're right. It depends on legislation. So it's not there now, but it could be.
You can
And
make
then,
it happen. The other thing, Julia, just adding on to that, is SharedWork is a 1-year application. And one of the things that we've are looking at and could use the help of the association and others is that why 1 year? Why not just make it an automatic renewal and have the employee opt in or out? That's just another option that we're looking at in discussions. Because at the end of a year, you, the employer, would have to reapply again. That's under current rules.
great, thank you for highlighting that for us. That's certainly something we'll work on easing. Okay, so another question is there any kind of penalty for using PPP funds on the shared work program? And I think that may be a question for the association rather than ESD. But if you recall, in order to meet the, to have the loan deferred, or excuse me, I guess excused, you have to meet certain payroll requirements, and that is you have to have the same number of employees, and then your payroll has to be the same amount, up to 75%. So you could certainly bring employees back at 75% of their weekly hours and utilize the shared work program. Because the PPP, of course, is just based off of what your payroll is. They wouldn't be looking at any type of benefits that the employees are getting from shared work.
Correct.
Yeah, the shared work program has no problem with folks participating in PPP, but we do want them to consider those rules regarding any kind of ability to participate in shared work.
Okay. And then is there the 1 week waiting period for shared work, or has that been waived for other unemployment programs? I assume it's also been waived for shared work.
That's correct. There is no waiting week at this time.
That may change. In recent policy meetings, the estimated date may be the 3rd week in June, but it is still being discussed and still under conversations. So that that waiting week period may change in the next several weeks.
Okay. Then is it best to add extra employees as business improves, or better to list employees now, even if you can't offer at this time, but you would like to eventually bring them back in the next 60 days? So I guess the question is, is there any downside or anything that should be considered if we add employees to the shared work list, but aren't able to offer them hours yet, but hope to soon?
No, there's no downside. It's recommended, in fact, to go ahead and get the people on. And I think the one filter a person might use is, are these people going to continue to work for the company? And that's all. If they are, and the hope is, intention is for both parties that they'll be back to work, then I would include them on the list.
Great. Is there, do you know currently, is there any lag time between applying and getting approved?
Yeah, our workload is about 7 to 10 days right now. We approve them and they are always in effect the Sunday following approval. So right now we're approving plans and they're beginning on the 14th or the 21st. It's kind of our backlog.
Okay, great. So then I'm seeing more technical question. We may just defer to Cheryl.
Actually, if you want, if you feel that you have time, we can go ahead and take those. It's going to be easier here than an email exchange.
Okay, great. So there's issues of continuity of weekly payments. So looks like maybe the weekly payments have been postponed, or some weeks you get them and some weeks you don't.
So this is
I can speak to that.
is this a regular unemployment? People have people that are claiming and they're getting paid and then they're not.
Because we are on SharedWork and have issues of continuity of weekly payments. How can we?
I see. Okay. Yeah. The first thing is that the first thing is to look at the hours the person reported. And then unfortunately, there's some wild cards coming in right now. We have this fraud issue that you're aware of. And we've had to take some extreme measures to, number one, stop the fraudulent payments, and then to verify that payments that we do continue to make are going to valid individuals and not fraud folks. So we have introduced some deliberate delays, but those are up to 2 days. It's not any more than that. So a person shouldn't see normally delay beyond that. Now, in that case, that's if they want to submit to the email on their specific situation, we can look into that. That's fine. But there are some deliberate delays right now, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's been in the news. Thank you, Bill, for covering that. And thanks for the question, Julia. There is an intentional policy practice right now to delay all payments by 1 to 2 days to verify that we are ensuring that the money is going to the right people. There's been a high increase of imposter fraud happening in our state, across the nation as well. And so we've implemented that policy to make sure that the people who deserve the money are getting the money.
Great. And then there's SharedWork employees who can't access their SAW account because of the imposter fraud. Should they be filing paper claims? Is there any other advice you have for them?
The best thing in that case, usually those individuals are in contact with our fraud unit or our Office of Special Investigation. And it's unfortunately, that has to be resolved first. And their claim dates and things are honored going forward. They're not going to lose time, but the fraud issue has to be resolved, and that's going to be between the individual and the unit, the fraud unit, and the Office of Special Investigation.
And we do have on our website on the homepage, and I can go to it. I think I'm still sharing. Am I still sharing by any chance?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. If you feel at any time that you receive something from Employment Security and you shouldn't have, or anything comes up related to, we've added this section here to imposter fraud. We've been getting a lot of calls about this. Just click on this imposter fraud area and please follow all the instructions that are listed here, because this is for your protection. And so we do also have some Q&As there all the way down to the bottom about what's happening. And it may take you some time, but here's an imposter fraud template that we're using. There's a toll-free number to call, a fax number. Follow all the instructions and do what is requested there to help you navigate this process. We'll figure out the claim situation and take care of that for you, but it's important that you follow this to protect your identity and other security measures that are important at this time.
Thank you. So another question, we're eligible for SharedWork. However, in April, we're denied, stating there's excess earnings. How do we appeal that designation?
Okay, so excess earnings comes up when we looked at, so first of all, the first thing that has to be checked is, was the person a SharedWork person at that time? Was the company plan in place? And if it was, then they had some other issue if they were in the SharedWork range. But usually when we see that, they're not eligible for SharedWork because the company plan hasn't started yet, or their hours were outside of the range. And when they're outside of the range, their gross earnings determine whether or not they're going to get benefits. And then when they get that message, it usually means that, if you remember that chart we looked at, the earnings deduction chart, their gross earnings right here. So the system took the gross earnings they reported and it applied the earnings deduction in that right-hand column, and the deduction was equal to or greater than their weekly benefit amount. And that's what ends up being excess earnings.
So therefore, they would not receive the $600 additional PUA.
Correct. In excess earnings, that's right. They don't get any benefits, right?
Because in Bill's example, Julia, if your weekly benefit amount was 300 and excess earnings meant that it was determined by the chart that it was 310, you've now exceeded your weekly benefit amount by those $10. Therefore, you now are not eligible for the pandemic unemployment. That makes sense? So excess earnings is above your weekly benefit amount, therefore zero PUA, additional $600.
Okay.
So the other thing we can just say for that person out there is take the person's gross earnings, look at this table, and find the deduction amount and see how it compares with their weekly benefit amount. And employees all know their weekly benefit amount.
Yeah.
Okay, another question about experience rating. So I guess just confirming, this person said they were told that the shared work program would not impact experience rating during the COVID-19 window.
There was a period where that information was being spoken and it was incorrect.
Okay. So then also a reminder that your experience rating and your rates are adjusted once a year, and that will occur the end of 2019. So we do have a period of time where we can work with the legislature and see if we can work to adjust that before rates do actually increase. And
they calculate those towards November. End of the year, they're calculating them for the next year. That's right.
There is precedent. No, please go, Julia. Please go.
The Washington Hospitality Association will be prioritizing that on behalf of our members. So just wanted to make that absolutely clear.
That's good. There is historical precedence back to 2012 when the federal government did waive that and encourage states to do so. They honored that. So just so that you know that, Julia.
Great, thank you. And then this individual, they've been on shared work for 3 weeks in a row with payments pending. Is this also an issue related to imposter fraud? If they've had 3 weeks of payments that are still pending, or should they work to get in touch with someone at the department?
No, that pending, if they've received a notification from us, they need to respond. So it could be pending because there is an issue with their claim that's a legitimate normal issue. And in those cases, they get letters or web notices if they're in e-services, and they need to be sure to respond to those. And then the other part of the answer is it could be identity related. And they would usually know that again by correspondence from us, or if they know themselves that they've got an identity issue, then that is what the delay is. That's why it's pending.
Okay, so if they see a pending notice, it means that the department is waiting for more information for them.
Yes,
well,
or it's adjudicating the information they have.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a number of reasons. We still have a number of backlogs that are taking place. And so, as Bill mentioned, if you check in your e-services, there should be an alert message or messages that you haven't read. Those are the messages you need to respond to. It'll tell you exactly what you need to do in your e-services account while logging in. Just because it's pending, there could be a number of determinations, but we are currently having a backlog of still, we're trying to clear out some things.
Great, thank you. We saved the best question for last. This is the last question we have. Can you tell me how to find the tab I've been directed to for changing the incorrect bank account number? I was directed to go to the e-services, then about me, but I can't find the about me. So that's a technical question. I don't know if you can show us.
I'm going to offer my best guess here, and I'm sorry, but it is that so in e-services, the individual has the ability to edit their account, and banking is one of them. There's a financials tab. They should try that. And then bank is another tab. And then the other thing that sometimes is overlooked is there's a little edit button that sometimes people miss. They don't realize they need to hit the edit button in order to make the changes. But that's where they'll find it under their customer account and financials or bank.
All right. So that's all of our questions. We've cleared out the Q&A section. I just wanted to extend a really sincere thank you to both of you for joining us today and helping us walk through the SharedWork program. I think it's going to be extremely valuable to our members and their employees. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julia. It's our pleasure. Please sign up for the webinars if you would like. Bill does those 3 times a week, and it provides additional quality information for you to move forward. Again, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Julia, for making this possible today.
Great. Thank you.
Have a great weekend.